You are 11 days into the Atlantic. There is no engine. There is no way off. The man who chose you is sitting 3 feet away with a notebook, recording who you find attractive, who you resent, and who you would follow if this went badly. He selected you because he expected you to turn violent. You haven't. And that is starting to make him angry. In May of 1973, 11 people boarded a raft in the Canary Islands and drifted for 101 days across the Atlantic Ocean. No motor, a steel box, 12 meters by 7, with a cabin 4 meters square. The newspapers called it the sex raft. They were wrong about what it was. So was the man who built it. His name was Santiago Genovés, born in Oran, Spain in December 1923. By 1973, he was an anthropologist at the National Autonomous University of Mexico, and he had an obsession. The obsession was violence. He came by it honestly. Genovés was living in Valencia when the Spanish Civil War broke out. He fled to France with his mother and his siblings while his father stayed behind. The family spent time in a French internment camp before reaching Mexico by ship. He grew up inside the thing he spent his life trying to explain. And by the 1970s, with Vietnam grinding toward its end, he had arrived at a conviction, one a great many people held then and hold now, that violence is simply what human beings are, beneath the manners, beneath the law, a fact of the species, like a heartbeat. He wanted to prove it, and he had an idea about how. Genovés had crewed for Thor Heyerdahl on the Raw expeditions, papyrus rafts, open ocean, no escape, and he noticed something out there. A raft is a laboratory. Put people on one and you have removed everything. Privacy, distraction, the option of walking away. What's left, he believed, is what a person actually is. So he built one. He named it Acali. It comes from Nahuatl. It means the house on the water. Steel hull, built specifically for the experiment. 12 meters by 7. A cabin of 16 square meters for 11 adults for 3 months. And every element of it was designed to generate conflict. Genovés selected his crew from hundreds of applicants, and he selected for friction. Different nationalities, religions, languages. An Angolan Catholic priest, a Japanese photographer, a French diver, an Israeli doctor, a Swedish ship's captain. He called it a microcosm of the world, and he assembled it the way you assemble a chemistry set, to react. Then he took things away. No reading material was permitted aboard. None. He wanted no escape into a book, nothing to occupy a mind that might otherwise occupy itself with the person 18 inches away. There was no privacy of any kind. The toilet was a hole over open water, in full view of the other 10. And he routed the voyage into the Caribbean at the start of hurricane season. On purpose. Before departure, every participant completed extensive psychological questionnaires. What would you do if threatened? Would you kill someone? What would make you kill someone? He publicly called the expedition a peace project. But here is the part of the design that tells you the most about him. Genovés put the women in charge. The raft was captained by Maria Bjornstam, a Swedish sea captain and the only person aboard with real command experience at sea. The ship's doctor was Edna Refs. 6 of the 11 were women. And the men, Genovés included, were assigned the menial work. You could read that as progressive. He partly framed it that way, gesturing at a changing world. That is not why he did it. He wrote it down. He wondered, in his own notes, whether putting women in power would produce less violence or more. Whether the men would grow frustrated taking orders, whether they would try to seize control. It wasn't a gesture toward equality. It was a variable. He inverted the hierarchy the way you tilt a beaker to see what runs out. And every day he measured. Genovés kept running tallies of aggression and sexual activity and cross-referenced them against the phase of the moon and the height of the waves. Questionnaires, spreadsheets, physiological monitoring equipment installed on the raft itself. He was searching for the trigger, the conditions under which ordinary people become dangerous. He was very confident he would find them.
The problem was the people. Weeks passed, then a month, then 2. 11 strangers, no privacy, no books, no exit, sharing a space smaller than most apartments. And they did not fracture. They talked. They sang, because there was nothing to read. They told each other the things people tell strangers they will never have to see again. There was friction, obviously, but not the thing he came for. Not violence.
Most people assume an experiment like this fails when nothing happens, that a null result is an empty notebook. But this wasn't nothing. 11 people engineered for conflict, stripped of every buffer, steered deliberately toward a hurricane. And they held. That was the finding. And the man measuring it could not accept it.
So Genovés stopped observing. The surviving participants have described what came next in detail. First to Genovés's own published account, and decades later on camera. He began seeding discontent, carrying complaints between people, telling one crew member what another had supposedly said. He issued insults. He threw water. He picked at the crew's tolerance for each other and kept picking. One of them remembered him as a puppet master. He was no longer running the experiment.
He was the experiment's only source of aggression, and he could not see it, because he had defined violence as something that happens to a group under pressure, something ambient, something natural, something that rises out of people the way heat rises out of a crowd. He had not defined it as something a man in charge does on purpose.
In the Caribbean, the radio brought a hurricane warning. Maria Bjornstam, the captain, the professional mariner, the one person whose entire career was keeping vessels alive in weather like this, moved to take the raft to shelter. Genovés overruled her. He seized command of the Acali. He stripped the authority he had personally assigned from the only person qualified to hold it, and he pointed an engineless steel box at a hurricane. Because the storm was the pressure his thesis needed, and the voyage had not supplied it. The weather turned away. Nobody died. That was luck, and nothing else. He assembled a crew designed to fracture, removed every comfort, steered them into hurricane season, told them their instincts would betray them. And when the moment finally came that someone aboard was willing to gamble 10 lives to get what he wanted, it was the man holding the clipboard.
He found his violent human being. He had brought him aboard.
The Acali reached Cozumel after 101 days. The press had already written the story. The sex raft, a floating scandal. It wasn't true, and it followed those 11 people for the rest of their lives. Some of them still resent the name. Genovés published a book about the voyage. For years, he kept arguing his case. And then, in May of 1986, he stopped. That month, 20 scientists from around the world met in Seville and drafted a document for the United Nations International Year of Peace. It became known as the Seville Statement on Violence. UNESCO adopted it 3 years later, and more than 40 professional bodies have endorsed it since. Its central finding is that it is scientifically incorrect to describe war and violence as genetically programmed into human nature. That the thing everyone calls a law of nature is not one. Santiago Genovés was one of the men who wrote it and signed it. 13 years after he tried to prove the opposite, on a raft, with 11 human beings he had put in the path of a storm. The same species who invented war is capable of inventing peace.
Invented, not inherited, not encoded. Chosen, and therefore choosable again. In 2018, the director Marcus Lindeen rebuilt the Acali at full scale and brought the survivors back aboard for a documentary called The Raft. 7 of them came. They sat in the reconstructed cabin in their 70s and 80s and talked about the 101 days. They did not describe a descent into savagery. They described each other. They had the answer in 1973. They were living inside it. The only person on that raft who couldn't see it was the one taking notes, and it cost him 13 years and very nearly 10 lives to learn what his own crew had already shown him. He spent 101 days looking for the worst thing a human being is capable of. He was sitting on it.